My name is Claire Morrison, and I turned 31 the night my family disowned me. Birthdays are supposed to be special, aren't they? You're supposed to feel loved, celebrated, remembered. Instead, mine became the stage for the most humiliating betrayal I've ever endured. It wasn't always like this. Growing up, I was the quiet child, the one who read books instead of running wild in the backyard, the one who helped set the table while my siblings fought over the biggest slice of cake. My father used to call me his steady anchor. Mom, though? She always looked at me like I was a mistake she wasn't sure how to fix. I thought things would change when I grew older, when I built a career and moved out. But distance didn't soften her heart. If anything, it hardened it. Still, I came home. Birthdays, Christmases, family dinners, I showed up, even when they made me feel like an outsider. I told myself it was worth it, that one day, maybe, they'd see me as part of them. But this year shattered the last piece of that hope. The restaurant was one of those cozy little places my dad loved before he passed. My brother, Jason, picked it for the dinner, acting as though it was his idea to keep traditions alive. He always liked to play the hero, swooping in for credit where none was due. I arrived early, smoothing down the simple navy dress I'd bought just for the occasion. I wanted to look nice, presentable, worth celebrating. When my family walked in, Mom, Jason, and his wife, my younger sister Haley, they barely glanced at me. Mom gave me a tight smile. Jason cracked a joke about me actually being on time for once, and Haley rolled her eyes before burying her face in her phone. I told myself to breathe, to let it go. Dinner began pleasantly enough, though pleasant in my family meant Jason talking about his newest promotion and Haley showing off photos from her vacation. I sat quietly, smiling when expected, nodding when appropriate. And then dessert came. The waitress set a single slice of cheesecake in front of me with a candle flickering on top. Everyone clapped half-heartedly. I leaned forward, ready to make my wish, when Mom raised her wine glass. To family, she said, her voice loud enough to turn heads at nearby tables. Everyone lifted their glasses. Then she added, almost casually, "Well, except Claire. You're not family anymore." The words hung in the air like smoke. Jason laughed. Haley giggled. Even Mom smirked, sipping her wine like she hadn't just gutted me in front of strangers. I froze, the candle's flame wavering in front of me. "What?" I whispered. Mom set her glass down, her eyes sharp. "Oh, don't act so surprised. You've never really been one of us, Claire. You don't fit. You never have." Laughter bubbled around the table, cruel and dismissive. Something inside me cracked. I wish I could say I stood up then and there, shouted them down, stormed out with dignity. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the flickering candle while tears burned behind my eyes. They didn't see me. Not really. But maybe they would. Because tucked inside my bag, folded neatly in a manila envelope, was a copy of my father's will. The will that none of them had bothered to read. The will that named me, not Jason, not Haley, not Mom, as executor. The will that gave me control over the one thing they all wanted most, the family estate. I had debated bringing it. Debated whether tonight was the night. And then Mom gave me my answer. I wasn't family? Fine. But she was about to find out what that meant. I made it through the rest of dinner in silence, their laughter scraping against my ears. I blew out the candle without making a wish. What was there to wish for, anyway? When the check came, Jason pushed it toward me with a smirk. "Birthday girl pays, right?" I swallowed hard, my hands trembling under the table. For a moment, I considered pulling out the envelope right then, slapping it down in front of them, and watching their smug smiles vanish. But not yet. Timing mattered. So I paid the bill, tucked my bag over my shoulder, and walked out of that restaurant with my head high. They thought they had humiliated me, but I was already holding the weapon that would undo them all. Back home in my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and pulled out the will. My father's handwriting stared back at me from the scanned copy, his careful words steady and deliberate. To my daughter Claire, it read, "I entrust the role of executor of my estate, for I know she will act with fairness and integrity." fairness, integrity. Words my mother had never associated with me. Words my siblings mocked whenever I chose honesty over convenience. And yet, my father had seen me. He had known. And tomorrow, so would they? The next morning, I called Jason. Family meeting, I said flatly. At the house. Noon. He snorted. Since when do you get to call meetings? Since Dad left me in charge. I replied, and hung up before he could answer. By noon, I stood in the living room of the Morrison estate, the house my father had built brick by brick, the house my mother now claimed as hers alone. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, glinting off the crystal vases Mom polished obsessively. Jason and Haley lounged on the couch, whispering and smirking. Mom sat in Dad's old chair, her chin lifted in defiance. Well, she said, what's this about? I placed the envelope on the coffee table and slid the papers out slowly, deliberately. It's about Dad's will. The smirks faded. Mom's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I met her gaze evenly. You said last night I wasn't family anymore. That's fine. But Dad didn't agree. He put it in writing. And I think it's time you all read it. I unfolded the will, my hands steady now, and watched as their faces shifted. Confusion, disbelief, then dawning horror. Jason leaned forward, his voice sharp. What is this? It's the truth, I said. And as silence filled the room, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on the outside looking in. I was the one holding the power. For a long moment, the only sound in the living room was the clock ticking on the mantel. Jason leaned forward, eyes darting over the lines of my father's will like he could force the words to change. Haley shifted uncomfortably on the couch, biting her lip. And Mom's face hardened into stone. This is nonsense, she said sharply. Your father didn't mean this. He must have been confused when he wrote it. I felt my jaw tighten. He wasn't confused. He was deliberate. He trusted me. Jason slammed his fist against the coffee table, rattling the crystal vase. Executor? That doesn't mean you get to control everything. It's just paperwork. The house, the money, the business, those are ours. Dad would have wanted it that way. I held his glare. Then why didn't he put it in writing? Silence. Haley glanced between us, her voice small. Wait, so Claire's in charge? She decides what happens with everything. I nodded. Exactly. Her eyes widened, and for once, she didn't smirk. Mom rose from Dad's chair, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she paced. This is absurd. I was his wife. I stood beside him for 35 years. He wouldn't hand the family estate to you, Claire. She stopped herself, but the venom in her eyes finished the sentence. You're not family. I forced myself to stand tall. He did. Because he trusted me to be fair, to protect what he built. Jason laughed bitterly. Fair? You've been jealous your whole life, sitting on the sidelines, waiting for a chance to take us down. And now you think this is it? I shook my head. I don't want to take you down. I want to honor Dad. Something none of you seem interested in. Mom's lips thinned into a cruel smile. Honor him? You mean betray us. Just like you always do. The words hit like a slap. But instead of breaking, I steadied myself. You disowned me last night. Remember? So why do you care what I do now? That shut her up, at least for a moment. They tried everything in the hours that followed. Jason barked about legal challenges. Haley whined that I was being unfair. Mom hissed that she'd find a way to overturn the will. But I didn't budge. I'm the executor, I repeated, my voice growing steadier each time. That means decisions go through me. Finally, Jason snapped. Fine. Be in charge. But don't expect us to go along with it quietly. You'll regret this, Claire. I gathered the will, sliding the papers back into the envelope. No. For once, I think you're the ones who will. And with that, I walked out of the Morrison estate, not the quiet, overlooked daughter anymore, but the woman holding the key to everything they thought belonged to them. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, documents, and meetings with lawyers. I had known being executor was a responsibility, but I hadn't realized how much power it carried. Every decision about the estate, property, assets, accounts flowed through me. And my family hated it. Jason called me constantly, demanding updates. What's happening with the house? With Dad's stocks? Don't think you can just keep us in the dark. Haley sent passive-aggressive texts. Dad would have wanted me to have the beach house. You don't even care about family memories. And Mom played the guilt card. I was his wife, Claire. Don't I deserve to be comfortable? Haven't I earned that much? Every word was a dagger. But every time I felt myself falter, I pictured Dad's steady handwriting. I entrust Claire because she will act with fairness and integrity. Fairness. Integrity. I repeated those words like a mantra. Then came the dinner ambush. Jason invited me out to talk things through. Against my better judgment, I went. The moment I sat down, I realized my mistake. Mom and Haley were already there, their faces set in grim determination. This is ridiculous, Jason began. You can't keep control of everything. We're family. We share it. I sipped my water, keeping my voice calm. You didn't share last week when you laughed at me in front of the entire restaurant. Or when you told me I wasn't family. Funny how that works. Mom leaned forward, her voice low and sharp. Listen to me, Claire. If you don't step aside, we will drag you through court until you're bankrupt. You can't afford to fight us. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to meet her gaze. Then go ahead. But you'll lose. Because Dad's words are clear. And unlike you, I'm not afraid of the truth. Haley scoffed. You're pathetic. You think a few legal words make you powerful? You're still the same weak little sister who never fit in. I smiled faintly. Maybe. But right now, the weak little sister is the one holding everything you want. And I'm not letting it go. Their faces darkened. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes. After that night, the war began. Jason tried to strong-arm me with lawyers. They sent letters filled with threats, questioning Dad's state of mind when he wrote the will. But every lawyer I spoke to shook their head. It's airtight. They don't have a case. Haley turned to social media, painting me as the greedy sibling stealing from the family. Neighbors started looking at me differently. Old friends sent me awkward messages. And Mom didn't stop calling. Every voicemail was a mix of venom and manipulation. You're tearing this family apart. How could you do this to your own mother? You'll regret betraying us. Each word hurt. But each word also proved I was finally standing my ground. One evening, exhausted from it all, I pulled out an old photo album. Pictures of me as a child, birthday parties, vacations, family dinners. In every photo, Dad's hand rested on my shoulder, steady and protective. He saw me, even when they didn't. And that reminder gave me strength. I called our lawyer the next morning. I want to schedule a formal reading of the will. All of them present. No more back and forth. He agreed. Sometimes the only way to silence noise is to confront it head-on. The day of the reading, we gathered in the same office where Dad had signed the will years before. Jason sat stiffly, arms crossed. Haley fidgeted with her phone. Mom glared at me like I'd murdered someone. The lawyer began, his voice calm and deliberate. He read every line, every clause, every instruction Dad had written. And when he reached the end, the words were undeniable. I was the executor. I had full authority. Jason slammed his chair back. This is a joke. Haley muttered under her breath. Unbelievable. Mom didn't move. She just sat there, her face pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. Finally, she stood. If this is the game you want to play, Claire, then fine. But don't expect us to make it easy. You may have Dad's words, but you'll never have us. I swallowed hard, steadying myself. You told me that already, Mom. At my birthday dinner. Remember? Her eyes flashed, and for the first time, she didn't have a comeback. As we left the office, Jason shoved past me, muttering curses. Haley stormed ahead, typing furiously on her phone. Mom lingered, her hand brushing against my arm as she passed. Her whisper was soft but venomous. You may think you've won, but this isn't over. I stood frozen, the weight of her words sinking in. Because, deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Being named executor looked powerful on paper. In reality, it was exhausting. The estate wasn't just the family house. It was bank accounts, investments, debts, old business ties, and property scattered across the state. Every decision needed documentation. Every asset had to be accounted for. And every step I took was met with resistance from the people who should have been my biggest support system. Jason called daily. What about Dad's investment account? Did you check the balance? Because I think that should come to me since I helped him with business stuff. Haley left voicemails dripping with entitlement. The lake cabin is mine, Claire. I already told my friends we'd do a summer trip there. Don't even think about touching it. And Mom? Mom went straight for the jugular. Your father made a mistake trusting you. You've never been responsible. You'll ruin everything he built. Every message was another reminder. My own family saw me not as a daughter, not as a sister, but as an obstacle to be broken. But I refused to break. One of my first duties was to assess the Morrison estate, the house itself. The place where I grew up. I drove out on a Saturday morning, my stomach tight, as I pulled into the long driveway. The house loomed ahead, grand and stately, its white shutters gleaming in the sun. My father had built it brick by brick with his own company. It wasn't just a house. It was his legacy. Walking inside was like stepping into another lifetime. The smell of polished wood. The creak of the staircase I used to race down on Christmas mornings. Memories pressed in from every corner. But it wasn't mine anymore. Not really. As executor, I had to make decisions, practical, financial, sometimes cold. The house was valuable. Too valuable to simply hand over to Jason or Haley to treat like their personal playground. I took notes, snapped photos, started planning an appraisal. That's when the door slammed open. Claire. Jason's voice boomed through the foyer. He stomped in, Haley at his heels. What are you doing here? I demanded. What are you doing here? He shot back. This is our house. No, I said firmly. It's Dad's house. And I'm the executor, which means I decide what happens to it. Haley scoffed, crossing her arms. You're seriously going to sell it, aren't you? God, Claire, you're heartless. My chest tightened, but I stood tall. I'm going to do what's fair. What's best for the estate. That's my job. Jason's face reddened. Fair? You wouldn't know fair if it hit you in the face. You're just jealous you never had what we did with Dad. The words stung, because part of me feared they were true. Dad had loved me, yes, but he had spent more time with Jason, grooming him to take over the business. Maybe Jason thought that gave him more of a claim. But Dad hadn't trusted him with the will. He had trusted me. I looked Jason square in the eye. If you own this house, you'll have to prove why you deserve it. But I don't think you can. His fists clenched, his chest heaving. For a second, I thought he might hit me. But then he spat on the floor, turned on his heel, and stormed out. Haley glared at me before following. The slam of the door echoed through the empty halls. I sank onto the couch, shaking, tears burning my eyes. They hated me. Truly hated me. But I couldn't let that stop me. That week, I scheduled a meeting with the estate attorney. I wanted everything documented properly, no loopholes for them to exploit. He was an older man named Mr. Caldwell, sharp-eyed and patient. You're handling a lot, Ms. Morrison, he said as he flipped through the file. And I imagine your family isn't making it easy. I laughed bitterly. That's putting it mildly. He studied me. Executor isn't an easy role. You'll be accused of bias, of greed, of betrayal. But your father chose you for a reason. If you act with fairness and integrity, the law will protect you. Fairness. Integrity. The words wrapped around me like armor. I left the office with my head a little higher. The sabotage began soon after. Jason contacted Dad's old business partners, trying to convince them I was incompetent. Haley posted online about me, stealing the family legacy. Mom even tried to close one of Dad's accounts herself, only to be blocked when the bank confirmed I was the legal executor. Each move they made only hardened my resolve.
but it wore me down, too.
One night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by stacks of paperwork, my eyes burning from exhaustion. I wanted to quit, to throw it all back at them and say, "Fine, take it. Take everything. I don't care anymore." But then I remembered my birthday dinner. The laughter. Mom's words, "You're not family anymore." And I realized quitting would prove them right. I refused to give them that satisfaction. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I drove to the estate again, this time with the appraiser. As we walked the grounds, I noticed something odd. The garden shed door was open. I approached cautiously, heart pounding. Inside, I found boxes, my father's old tools, photo albums, even documents. But they were scattered, rummaged through. Someone had been here. When I confronted Jason later, he smirked. "Oh, relax. We were just looking for memories. You don't get to hoard everything." I clench my fists. "Those aren't yours to touch without my permission. If you take one more thing, I'll have you charged with theft." He laughed in my face. "You wouldn't dare." But the truth was, I would. And for the first time, I saw him hesitate. That night, I sat in the estate's library, surrounded by dust and silence. I pulled one of Dad's old journals from the shelf and flipped through the pages. His handwriting filled the margins with notes about projects, ideas, even little reminders about birthdays, including mine. Tears blurred my vision. Dad had believed in me, even when no one else did. And I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for him, for his memory, for the values he had built our family on, even if Mom, Jason, and Haley had abandoned them. I closed the journal, set my shoulders, and whispered into the empty room. "I won't let you down, Dad." The next morning, I called Mr. Caldwell. "I want to move forward with liquidating some assets," I said firmly. "It's time to show them I'm serious."
He paused.
"Are you prepared for the fallout?" I took a deep breath.
"Yes."
"Let them come at me. I can handle it." Because for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. The first time I signed the order to liquidate an asset, my hands shook. It wasn't just paper, it was power. Real, tangible power. The bank account balance shifted under my pen, transferring funds into the estate trust. My decisions weren't just words anymore. They were action. And my family felt it immediately. Jason showed up at my apartment that night, pounding on the door like he meant to break it down. "Claire," he shouted, "open the damn door." Against my better judgment, I did. He barged in, his face flushed with rage.
"You sold the stocks," he snapped.
"Yes," I said calmly, standing my ground. "It was the right call. The estate needs liquidity." "Liquidity," he spat the word like poison. "Those stocks were mine. Dad promised." "No," I cut in. "If Dad had promised you, it would have been in the will. But it wasn't. And as executor, I followed the law." His chest heaved. For a moment, I thought he might strike me. But then he laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You think you're so smart, so righteous. But you're just hiding behind paperwork. You don't know how to lead, Claire. You never have." I swallowed the sting of his words, forcing myself to stay steady. "Maybe. But I know how to do what's fair. And that's more than I can say for you." His eyes burned holes through me before he stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I sank into a chair, my body trembling. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was war. The next morning, Haley posted on social media, "Imagine your sister selling off family assets like they're junk at a yard sale. Betrayal at its finest." The comments rolled in, siding with her. Neighbors, old classmates, even family friends chimed in about how heartless I was. Reading them felt like being stabbed over and over. But then I remembered Dad's words in the will. Fairness. Integrity. And I realized I didn't owe the world an explanation. Only the law. Mom was next. She called me 3 days later, her voice dripping with venom. "You're destroying us," she hissed. "Do you even realize what you're doing?" "Yes," I said evenly. "I'm doing what Dad asked me to do." Her laugh was cold. "Your father always had a soft spot for you. He thought you were honest. But you're just petty. You're using his trust to punish us." My throat tightened, but I didn't let her hear the crack in my voice. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting what he built. You're not family anymore, she snapped. You never will be. The line went dead. I sat in the silence, tears streaming down my face. She'd said it before, but hearing it again, so final, still cut me open. And yet, beneath the pain, something else flickered. Resolve. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. 2 weeks later, I made the hardest decision yet. The Morrison estate, the house itself, would be listed for sale. It wasn't a choice I made lightly. That house was my childhood, my father's legacy. But the estate needed balance, and the law required fair distribution. Keeping it in the family would only fuel more battles. Selling it meant clean closure. When I told Mr. Caldwell, he nodded. It's the right call. But they won't see it that way. He was right. Jason called within the hour. You can't sell the house, he screamed. That's ours. That's history. No, I said firmly. It was Dad's. And now it belongs to the estate, which I manage. It's going up for sale. Haley texted me in all caps. You're a monster. How dare you? And Mom showed up at my door. She looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed, but her voice was sharp as ever. You're erasing him, she accused. Piece by piece, you're erasing your father. I felt my throat close.
No.
I'm honoring him. He trusted me to be fair, to do what's right. Her lips curled. Do you know what fairness is, Claire? Fairness is family. And you're throwing that away. I took a shaky breath. You threw me away first. Remember? For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Regret? Doubt? But then it hardened again. You'll regret this, she whispered. I promise you will. She turned and walked away, leaving me trembling in the doorway. The open house was surreal. Strangers walked through the halls where I had celebrated Christmas, where Dad had tucked me in after nightmares. Their footsteps echoed in the spaces that had once been filled with laughter. I stood in the living room, my chest aching, as one couple admired the fireplace. Beautiful craftsmanship, the man said. Solid work. I smiled faintly. My father built it. Saying the words felt like a goodbye. That night, Jason called again, his voice low and dangerous. If you go through with this, Claire, you'll regret it. I closed my eyes. You keep saying that. But the only people who should regret anything are the ones who laughed at me, who told me I wasn't family. I didn't start this war. But I'll finish it. Silence crackled on the line before he hung up. The offers came quickly. The estate was prime property, and within a week, I had 3 serious buyers. I sat at my kitchen table, the contracts spread before me, pen in hand. My fingers trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of what this meant. Signing would end it. The house would be gone. The war would shift to money instead of bricks and memories. I thought of Dad, of his steady hand on my shoulder, of his words, fairness, integrity.
And I signed.
The news hit my family like a bomb. Haley posted a furious rant online. Jason showed up at the estate screaming at the realtor. And Mom didn't call. She sent a letter. Her handwriting was tight, angry. You've betrayed us. Betrayed your blood. Don't come to me when you realize you've destroyed everything. You're no daughter of mine. I held the letter in shaking hands, tears dripping onto the paper. It was final. They didn't just hate me. They had erased me. But as I folded the letter and tucked it into the will's envelope, I realized something. Maybe being their daughter had never been the point. Maybe the point was being my father's daughter. And that I still was. The next morning, I woke with a strange calm. The house was sold. The estate was liquid. My family had declared me an enemy. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Because I finally understood. Power isn't about being liked. It's about doing what's right. And for the first time in my life, I had the power and the will to do exactly that. The day the Morrison estate officially transferred ownership felt like the end of an era. I signed the final paperwork in Mr. Caldwell's office. My hand didn't shake this time. My signature slid across the dotted line like it belonged there. And just like that, the house my father had built, the place my family had clung to as proof of their importance, was no longer ours. Walking out of the office, I thought I'd feel grief. Instead, I felt lighter. It wasn't my burden anymore. But for my family, it was gasoline on the fire. Jason stormed into my apartment that evening, slamming the door so hard a picture frame rattled. "You sold it." His voice cracked with fury. "You actually sold Dad's house." "Yes," I said calmly, keeping my eyes on him. "Because it was the right decision." "The right decision?" He laughed bitterly. "You're insane. That house was our legacy." "No," I corrected softly. "Dad was our legacy. The house was just walls and wood." His face twisted. "You don't get it, Claire. You never did.
You've always been jealous.
And now you've destroyed everything just to spite us." I stood tall, my voice firm.
No.
"I destroyed nothing. I protected Dad's wishes. You're angry because you can't bully me anymore. And that terrifies you." For a moment, Jason's hand twitched like he might strike me. But instead, he spat on the floor, muttered, "You'll pay for this," and stormed out. The echo of his footsteps lingered long after he was gone. Haley, of course, took to social media. "My so-called sister just sold our family home. Years of memories gone. Some people have no heart. #betrayal, not my sister." The post blew up, drawing sympathy from people who knew nothing of the truth. I scrolled through the comments, my chest tight. What kind of monster sells their parents' house? She must be jealous. She didn't get enough attention growing up. Family like that isn't family at all. Each line was a blade. But then, buried in the noise, one comment stood out. "She's executor. That means her father trusted her. Maybe she's doing what's right, not what's easy." I clung to those words like a lifeline. And then came Mom. Her letter arrived 2 days later, written in her neat, controlled handwriting.
"Claire,
"You have gone too far. Selling the house was unforgivable. You've not only betrayed me, you've betrayed your father's memory. Don't bother coming around anymore. You're not welcome. You're not family. You never were." I read it 3 times, my heart breaking anew with each line. I wanted to crumple it, burn it, scream at the empty room. But instead, I folded it neatly and slipped it into the same envelope that held Dad's will. Because one day, I would need to remember just how far they'd gone to erase me. Mr. Caldwell warned me the next step would be worse. "Now that assets are liquid," he explained, "distribution begins. And that's when emotions flare the most. Brace yourself, Claire. They'll come at you harder." He was right. The calls and threats escalated. Jason demanded more than his share, insisting Dad would have wanted it. Haley whined that she deserved extra for being the youngest. And Mom? She called late one night, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you're clever," she said. "But you're not. You're weak. And you're alone. When this is over, you'll have no family, no friends, nothing." Tears stung my eyes, but my voice was steady. "Maybe. But I'll still have integrity. And that's more than you can say." Her hissed reply chilled me. "You'll regret this, Claire. I promise." The line went dead. I sat in the dark, trembling. Not just from grief anymore. From fear. Because for the first time, I realized my family wasn't just angry. They were dangerous. The next week, I noticed my car had been keyed. Deep, jagged scratches across the driver's side door. The police shrugged when I reported it. "No proof it was family," the officer said. "Could have been anyone." But I knew. That same day, I came home to find the lock on my apartment door tampered with. Nothing was missing, but the message was clear. "We can reach you." I called Mr. Caldwell in a panic. He listened carefully, then sighed. "Claire, I need you to understand. Families fight hardest over money. You're in the right, legally and morally. But you need to protect yourself. Change your locks. Document everything. And don't meet them alone." I swallowed hard, nodding even though he couldn't see me. "I can handle it." But that night, lying awake in my bed, I wasn't so sure. 2 days later, I confronted Jason in person. We met in a cafe, neutral ground. He looked tired, but his eyes still burned with anger. "You're dragging this out," he said bitterly. "If you'd just step aside, we could end this quietly." I sipped my coffee, keeping my voice calm. "Quietly means letting you take everything. That's not happening." His jaw tightened. "Dad would hate what you're doing." "No," I said softly. "Dad would hate what you're doing."
Greed. Lies. Threats.
That's not his legacy. Jason slammed his fist on the table, making cups rattle. "You think you're better than us, Claire? You're nothing. You always were." I met his glare evenly. "Then why did Dad trust me and not you?" For once, he had no reply. He stood abruptly, muttering curses, and stormed out. I sat there, my hands shaking, but inside, something shifted. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of him. Not of any of them. Because their hatred didn't make me weak. It proved I was strong enough to stand where they couldn't. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, Dad's will in front of me. I traced his handwriting with my finger, whispering the words aloud. Fairness. Integrity. The world had turned those words into weapons against me. But to Dad, they were a promise. And I would keep it, even if it cost me everything else. The next morning, I made a decision. No more hiding. No more reacting to their threats. I would finish what Dad started. I called Mr. Caldwell. "I'm ready to finalize the distributions. Let's set the meeting. All of them present. No excuses." He hesitated. "Are you sure? It could get ugly." I took a deep breath. "It's already ugly. Let's end it." The meeting was scheduled for the following week. As I prepared, sorting documents and reviewing every clause of the will, a strange calm settled over me. For months, I had been the quiet daughter, the mocked sister, the outsider they never claimed.
But now?
Now I was the one holding the future in my hands. And soon, my family would have to face the truth, whether they liked it or not. The day of the distribution meeting, the sky was gray, heavy with a threat of rain. It felt fitting. I arrived at Mr. Caldwell's office with a folder of documents tucked under my arm. My heart hammered, but my steps were steady. This was the moment everything had been leading toward. Jason, Haley, and Mom were already there, seated stiffly in the conference room. Their eyes snapped to me as I walked in. Jason sneered. "Well, well. The Queen finally arrives." Haley smirked, scrolling on her phone. "Can't wait to see how you spin this one, Claire." Mom didn't speak. She just stared at me, her expression cold, her lips pressed into a thin line. I sat across from them, placing the folder on the table. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. Today we'll finalize the distribution of the Morrison estate. Claire, as executor, has prepared the documents." Jason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Yeah. Let's get this over with." I opened the folder and began. After settling debts and legal fees, the estate totals just under $3 million. The assets have been liquidated as per legal requirements. The distribution will be equal. 1/3 each to Jason, Haley, and me. Haley looked up from her phone, frowning. "Equal? That's it? What about the cabin? What about Dad's stocks?" "Liquidated," I said firmly. "Converted to cash. Divided fairly." Jason slammed his hand on the table. "That's robbery. I was supposed to inherit the business assets. Dad told me." I cut him off. If Dad wanted that, he would have written it. He didn't. The will is clear. His face turned red. "You manipulated him. You whispered in his ear. Made him think you were the golden child." The accusation hit like a slap, but I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't manipulate anyone. Dad trusted me, because I was the only one who didn't treat him like a bank. Haley scoffed. "Oh, please. You're just jealous you never got attention. This is your revenge, Claire. Admit it." I met her glare steadily. "If revenge looks like following the law and keeping Dad's word, then fine. Call it what you want." Mom finally spoke, her voice sharp. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I turned to her, my chest tight. "Enjoying what?" "Watching us suffer. You've always been bitter, Claire. Always on the outside looking in. Now you think you're finally in control. But you're just proving what I've always known. You don't belong in this family. The words sliced deep, but this time, I didn't let them bleed me dry. I straightened my shoulders. You disowned me at my birthday dinner. Remember? You made your choice. And now I'm making mine. Her eyes flashed, but I didn't waver. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat again, trying to keep the meeting professional. The distributions are straightforward. All funds will be transferred into separate accounts. There is no legal basis for additional claims. Jason leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. If you think I'm walking out of here with the same share as Claire, you're insane. I deserve more. I looked him in the eye.
No.
You deserve exactly what the will says. Nothing more, nothing less. Haley jumped in, her voice shrill. This isn't fair. I'm the youngest. Dad would have wanted me taken care of. I snapped. Fairness isn't about favoritism. Fairness is equality. And Dad trusted me to see it through. The room went silent. For once, none of them had a comeback. But silence didn't last. Jason shoved his chair back violently, standing so fast it toppled over. You think this is over? It's not. I'll fight you in court until you're broke. I'll ruin you. Haley stood too, pointing at me like an accuser. You're not our sister. You never were. You're just some stranger who got lucky with paperwork. And Mom didn't stand. She just stared at me with such venom I felt it in my bones. You're dead to me, she whispered. Something inside me cracked, but it wasn't weakness this time. It was release. I stood slowly, gathering the documents into the folder. My voice was steady when I spoke. I've been dead to you for a long time, but Dad saw me, and that's enough. I turned to Mr. Caldwell. Let's finish the paperwork. The rest of the meeting blurred. Signatures. Transfers. Final confirmations. By the time it was over, the estate was officially closed. The Morrison legacy had been divided, clean and final. Jason stormed out without looking at me. Haley muttered curses under her breath as she followed. Mom lingered for a moment, her eyes locked on mine. For a second, I thought I saw regret flicker in her gaze. But then it vanished, replaced by pure disdain. You'll regret this, Claire, she said softly. One day, you'll realize what you've lost. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I already know what I've lost. I just don't think it was worth keeping. She flinched, just slightly before turning and walking out. When the door closed, silence filled the room. I sank into my chair, my hands trembling. Mr. Caldwell studied me for a moment. You did well, he said quietly. Most people would have crumbled under that kind of pressure. I laughed bitterly. I almost did. But you didn't. His gaze softened. Your father would be proud. Tears filled my eyes, spilling over before I could stop them. I hope so. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the folder of documents on the table in front of me. The battle was over. The estate was settled. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. Because even though I had won, the cost was everything I had once wanted, my family. I poured a glass of wine and stared out the window at the city lights. They had disowned me. They had hated me. They had threatened me. But they hadn't broken me. And for the first time, I realized that was the true victory. Still, their voices haunted me. You're not family. You don't belong. You'll regret this. I pressed my hands to my temples, willing the words away. Maybe they were right. Maybe I would regret it. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had honored Dad. I had kept his wishes. I had chosen fairness and integrity, even when it cost me everything else. And that was something I could live with, even if it meant living alone. The Morrison estate was closed, the funds divided, the documents signed. On paper, it was finished. But grief doesn't follow paperwork. It lingers in the cracks of silence, in the spaces left behind when people who once filled your life turn into strangers. The first weekend after the final meeting, I found myself driving past the old estate. The new owners had already moved in. A different car sat in the driveway. Curtains I didn't recognize hung in the windows. It was no longer ours. I pulled over at the end of the drive, sitting with my hands gripping the steering wheel. Memories came rushing back, racing Haley up the stairs, Dad teaching Jason how to hammer nails in the shed, Mom scolding me for reading too long under the kitchen light. And then my birthday dinner. Her voice echoing in my head, "You're not family anymore." Tears blurred my vision. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, letting the sobs shake through me. Because as much as I tried to be strong, I had wanted their love, craved it even, and losing it, final, absolute, was a wound no one could heal. But after the tears came quiet, and in the quiet, a strange realization settled in. Maybe I hadn't lost family. Maybe I had simply lost people who refused to treat me like family. And maybe that was okay. The weeks that followed were strange. Neighbors who had once gossiped about me started nodding politely in the grocery store. A few even whispered encouragement. "You did the right thing, Claire." It surprised me, this quiet respect from people who had never spoken up before. But at night, loneliness still curled around me like a heavy blanket. Birthdays, holidays, simple dinners, I thought of the empty chairs where Jason, Haley, and Mom should have been. I filled the silence with work. Long hours at the office. Volunteer shifts at the legal aid clinic downtown. Helping strangers reminded me why Dad had trusted me. Fairness. Integrity. Values bigger than blood ties. One evening, after helping an elderly man fill out his housing forms, he clasped my hand and said, "You're a good one. The world needs more like you." I blinked back tears, whispering, "Thank you." Because sometimes, family isn't who you're born with. Sometimes it's who sees you. Then, one morning, a letter arrived. The handwriting was Jason's. My stomach twisted as I opened it. "Claire, I hate how this turned out. I hate what you did. But I can't stop thinking about Dad. Maybe you were right. Maybe he saw something in you that I didn't. I don't forgive you. But I can't pretend anymore that you weren't stronger than me." No apology. No warmth. But buried under the bitterness was something I never thought I'd see. Respect. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the envelope with Dad's will. Not because it healed me, but because it reminded me that even in the wreckage, something had shifted. Haley never wrote. But months later, I heard through a mutual friend that she had gone quiet online. No more rants, no more hashtags. Maybe the fight had drained her. Or maybe she realized the world wasn't as eager to cheer her on anymore. And Mom never reached out. Her silence was louder than her words had ever been. But one Sunday, I visited Dad's grave. Fresh flowers already lay there, roses his favorite. And tucked between the stems was a small note, and signed, "I miss you."
I'm sorry.
I stared at it for a long time, the wind tugging at my hair. Was it for Mom? From Haley? I would never know. But for the first time, I let go of needing the answer. Seasons changed. Leaves turned gold and fell. Snow blanketed the city. Spring brought blossoms. Life moved forward as it always does. I applied for a new position at the legal aid clinic, one that would let me use my organizational skills to help more families navigate estates, housing, custody battles. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt right. On my first day, the director shook my hand and said, "You've been through fire, Claire. That's why you'll be good at this. People trust those who've lived it." And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not because of my family, not because of a house or a name, because of me. The following year, when my birthday came, I dreaded it. Memories of the last one still stung. But my coworkers surprised me. They brought cake to the office, sang off-key, and handed me a card filled with scribbled notes. "You're valued. We're glad you're here. Thank you for what you do." I blinked back tears as I blew out the candles. Because maybe I didn't have the family I was born into, but I had people who saw me, who chose me, and that mattered more. One evening, I sat by my window with Dad's will in my lap. The edges were worn from how many times I had unfolded it, read it, clung to it like a lifeline. I whispered his words again. Fairness. Integrity. And then, for the first time, I folded the will and placed it in my drawer. Not because I didn't need it anymore, but because I finally carried those words inside me. I didn't need proof of who I was. I was living it. Looking back now, I realized the betrayal didn't break me. It freed me. Freed me from chasing love I was never going to receive. Freed me from shrinking to fit a family that had never truly seen me. Freed me to step into the person my father always believed I could be. They told me I wasn't family. And maybe they were right. Because I'm more than family. I'm myself. And that's enough.